So instead of writing an essay on why I believe Scotland should vote yes on the 18th of September, I decided it would maybe be better to make what is now an Oscar nominated short film to explain my views. There's one key reason I'm voting yes, and that is that I believe that all decisions about Scotland's future should be taken here in Scotland by anyone who chooses to call Scotland home. Scotland making decisions about Scotland, I really don't understand why people are so fearful of such a prospect and ultimately might reject it. On the 18th of September, for the first time, we hold complete power and sovereignty over our own country, and the decision is whether or not to become the first nation on earth to reject our own independence and hand that power back to London for good. Or we could vote yes and choose to keep that power here in Scotland and in our communities. For me, there are three key areas: a better economy, a fairer society, and a true democracy. First of all, nobody doubts that Scotland could be a successful independent country. Independent experts claim that Scotland would be the 14th wealthiest country per head of population in the developed world. That's 4 places ahead of the UK, and in fact our GDP was 11% higher than that of the UK in 2012. These rankings of wealth are dominated by similar small independent nations with populations of less than 10 million people, countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Luxembourg, New Zealand and so on. There is a direct correlation between the size of the country and the wealth of the people. The more power is concentrated, the less wealth is spread fairly, and with fewer people there is less of a wealth gap between those at the top and those at the bottom. There has never been a country in history as wealthy as Scotland to gain its independence, so the question remains, why is Scotland's vast wealth not working for us all? It is estimated that 1 in 4 children in Scotland are born into poverty, and life expectancy in Glasgow is as low as 50 years of age. Is that what Better Together means? If that wasn't bad enough, an additional 100,000 children in Scotland are to be pushed into poverty by 2020 thanks to the tax and benefit policies imposed by the UK government. My conscience simply wouldn't allow me next Thursday to put a cross in the no box in support of a union that's sitting back and allowing this to happen to some of Scotland's most vulnerable. Upon independence, Scotland will have full control over welfare and taxation that is currently controlled by London. We now have the opportunity to enact the same legislation, taxation and regulation that similar countries like Norway and Sweden, for instance, employ, and we can finally change our society for the better. We already have our own parliament, our own legal and education systems, our own cultural heritage, our own international reputation. We already act like we are our own country, so let's just make it official next Thursday. When it comes to the NHS, it remains free at the moment, but the worry is if the rest of the UK goes down the route of charging for care, then that knocks on to the Scottish budget, making it difficult to guarantee that the NHS can remain free in Scotland. Right now, the Scottish Parliament is given a budget from Westminster, a return of our taxes from London, and then the Scottish Government decides what to spend it on. But that budget keeps being cut every year, putting pressure on what the government here can protect. Instead of having a pocket money parliament, wouldn't it be better if we were in charge of our own finances like every other normal country, and we can decide to spend our money on what's important to us, like the NHS and tuition fees? Also, the SNP, Green Party and others have stated that the right to free education and free healthcare should be enshrined in an independent Scotland's constitution, meaning that whatever party that gets elected could not remove these rights from us. But that is a guarantee that could only come with independence. With regards to a written constitution, we can also enshrine the right to free childcare, allowing many women and other parents in Scotland to get back to work and increase their personal income, one step to achieving full gender equality in Scotland. In terms of rights for LGBTI Scots, our rights can be enshrined, giving them the same standing as basic human rights, making us one of only 8 other independent nations to do so. What a message of equality and support that will be to the rest of the world upon independence, a truly equal society where we all have an equal standing. You owe it to yourselves to research the opportunities before you cast your vote next Thursday. You won't get a fair and balanced argument from any of the mainstream media, and I include the BBC in that. Also, for those complaining about people talking about the referendum, this isn't a general election, this is about the future of Scotland forever, so yeah, it's kind of important. Gandhi didn't win India's independence from the UK by sitting back and saying, I can't be arsed talking about politics. It'll all be over in a week's time, then everyone can get back to posting pictures of their dinner or tweeting about going to the gym every day. I think you'll manage for a wee bit longer. I believe in real representative democracy, I believe in accountability, I believe that the status quo is not as good as it gets, and I believe a better Scotland is possible. Because at its heart, this is about democracy. How is it democratic that Scotland votes Labour consistently at each general election, but gets Conservative governments anyway? How is it fair that we have one Conservative MP for Scotland, yet our Prime Minister is a Tory? The southeast of England simply holds too much influence for us here in Scotland to affect the outcome of any UK general election. With independence, we will get the government that the majority of the Scottish people vote for every time, be that SNP, Labour, Liberal Democrat, Green Party, or God forbid Tories. After independence, we can still work with our friends and neighbours in the rest of the UK in areas that are mutually beneficial to both of us, but the difference is that we shall stand on the world stage as equal, independent countries. Because that's what this is about. It's about Scotland joining the world and playing our part like every other nation. Also, the Westminster parties are keen to stress the emotional arguments of voting no. I didn't realise that the ties of family and friendship were dependent on an out-of-touch parliament 400 miles away. I don't love my uncle any less because he lives in Australia. Let's look at it this way. Imagine the vote next Thursday was not for Scotland to become independent, but for an already independent Scotland to join the UK. Here's the prospectus. Your parliament will be moved hundreds of miles away, where you'll be in a tiny minority of seats of just 9%. You won't have enough votes to determine who forms the government of your country. Control over your country's resources will now be in the hands of London. Powers over the Scottish people's taxation, welfare, whether or not we get dragged into wars will rest solely in London. You will join a union that is over £1 trillion in debt. The revenues raised for your exports shall flow to London, and then they'll decide how much to return to you. And finally, Europe's largest concentration of nuclear weapons shall be located just 40 miles from your largest city and most populous region without your consent and without the ability to remove them if you disagree with them. I really think that's a prospect that would be firmly rejected. The Union is not rosy. Independence is a real viable option for us. You know, the Westminster parties are afraid to lose us. That is why they'll say anything, promise the piss power and that power over the next week. My question is this. Why vote no on the prospect that a few extra powers might come sometime down the line depending on which party wins the UK general election, in which Scotland has no control over the outcome of, by the way? A few scraps thrown from the Master's table. One power they'll never give Scotland is control over our own natural resources. Control over your country's resources. It really isn't much to ask for. Wouldn't it be better if the people of Scotland won all the powers for Scotland by voting yes, rather than leaving it to a bunch of out-of-touch politicians in Westminster? We can be so much more than just a northern region of an unequal country. We just have to believe in ourselves. As a wise freedom fighter once said, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. Let's take control over our country's future. Let's tell the world we're ready now. Let's say, yes we can. Let's vote yes.